The slow disintegration of a life rarely announces itself with chaos. It begins quietly, like water patiently carving through stone, gradually breaking down the foundation of trust until the cracks can no longer be ignored. For Daniel, the moment everything began to fall apart came on a night that held no signs of trouble. He was waiting for his wife, Emily, to return home. She had gone out with friends, saying she needed some space, a night to unwind, to breathe. But as the hours dragged past midnight, each tick of the clock tightened the knot of worry in his chest. When the door finally creaked open, what he saw left him frozen. Emily stood in the threshold, but it wasn't the woman he knew. She looked worn and frayed, as though she'd been caught in a storm and left unmade by it. Her hair was a tangled mess, her clothes rumpled and clinging in odd places, as if they'd been handled by someone else. Then Daniel noticed something that turned his stomach, a faint shimmer of moisture trailing down her legs. The air around her carried a scent that didn't belong, a cologne that wasn't his, wasn't hers. It was the presence of someone else, someone who had crossed a line that should never have been approached. He couldn't find the words, his voice trapped somewhere deep inside, crushed by the weight of realization. Moving on pure instinct, he took her hand and led her to their bedroom. Gently, he helped her wash, his movements calm and deliberate as he wiped away the visible traces of the night. But the silence between them was suffocating, thick with tension and dread that gnawed at his insides. "What happened, Em?" he asked softly, his voice trembling as it left his throat, barely holding together. Her eyes, dull and distant, avoided his. "It was nothing," she murmured, her words slurred from too much alcohol. "Just once. I'm sorry." The confession hit him like a blade. Not shouted. Not detailed. Just a few words that cleaved through his fragile hope, leaving him hollow. He wanted to push for more, to demand the truth behind her vague, heartbreaking apology. But he held back. Not like this. Not now. Swallowing the rising tide of pain and betrayal, he helped her into bed and stepped away, the weight of the night pressing down like lead. His breath came unevenly, his heart pounding with everything he couldn't say. Part of him wanted to believe this could still be undone, that somehow it hadn't happened the way it seemed. But deeper inside, something colder began to take hold, the knowledge that what had occurred might have broken them beyond mending. Morning came, and with it, clarity. The alcohol had faded from Emily's system, but it left a brutal truth in its wake. Daniel hadn't slept. His mind had been spiraling all night, looping over her words, the smell that clung to her, the way she stumbled through the doorway. He sat at the dining table, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. In front of him lay photographs, not meant to shame her, but to make sense of what had happened, to give form to the unbearable. Close-ups of the stains on her skirt, a faint imprint of fingers along her hip. Evidence he couldn't ignore, no matter how much he wanted to. When Emily appeared, still wearing the crumpled clothes from the night before, her eyes were red and swollen. She froze when she saw the photos. "Do you even understand what you did?" Daniel asked. His voice wasn't angry, it was heavy, filled with quiet devastation. Her face crumpled, and she seemed to fold in on herself, her body shaking as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." The word mistake ignited something raw inside Daniel, a flash of anger that surged through his chest. "Mistake?" he repeated, the edge in his voice cutting sharp. "You didn't trip and fall into this. You chose to go out that night. You chose to drink. You let someone else touch you." Emily tried to speak, her hands gesturing weakly toward the alcohol, blaming blurred judgment and poor decisions. But her voice lacked weight, like she was reciting excuses more for herself than for him. And that realization struck Daniel harder than the betrayal itself. This wasn't about him. "Not really. I need to get out of here," he muttered, standing suddenly. He couldn't sit there and watch her mourn her own guilt, trapped in the wreckage of what they had built. Without another word, he stepped outside into the crisp morning air, leaving her behind to reckon with what she had done. The questions wouldn't stop. They clung to his thoughts like thorns. Who was this man? Why her? How long had it been going on? Her fragmented confession had included a name, Nathan. That was all Daniel needed to begin unraveling the truth. A few quick searches online gave him a face to match the name. Nathan looked confident, smooth, the type of man who moved through life untouched by consequences. But what stunned Daniel more than the polished smile or the curated charm was the familiarity. Nathan wasn't some faceless stranger. Emily followed him on social media. He followed her, too. This wasn't a random moment of weakness. It had roots. A connection. Something that had been building beneath the surface. Then the final blow landed, knocking the breath from Daniel's lungs. Nathan was married. His social media was a digital scrapbook of a perfect life, family vacations, birthdays, quiet breakfasts with his wife. A picture of domestic bliss. It mirrored everything Daniel had believed he had, until that night. The deeper he dug, the more deliberate it all seemed. This hadn't been some chance meeting at a bar. It was intentional, coordinated. Nathan had gone there because Emily would be there. Desperate for answers, even if they would destroy him, Daniel found himself reaching for Emily's phone while she slept. He told himself it was for closure, but it felt like searching in the dark for something he already feared. The messages between her and Nathan weren't frequent, but they didn't need to be. Each one was casual, flirtatious, laced with familiarity. Nathan hadn't stumbled across her by accident. He'd known she would be at the bar. He went there for her. It wasn't coincidence. It was premeditated. And worst of all, they both had known what they were doing. Neither was blind to the implications. Neither had been forced. They had chosen this. With that certainty, Daniel made a decision. Nathan's wife, Olivia, deserved the truth, just as he had. This wasn't about revenge. It was about honesty, about giving her the same painful clarity that had been forced upon him. He wrestled with the decision, turning it over in his mind, but eventually he composed a message. Calm, measured, requesting a meeting. She responded quickly. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in the city, a neutral place where emotions could be managed. Olivia was already there when Daniel arrived. Her auburn hair was neatly tied back, her posture composed, but there was a flicker of concern in her expression as she greeted him with a polite smile. When she spoke about Nathan, there was warmth in her voice, a soft affection that made Daniel's task even heavier. He didn't soften the truth. Your husband had an affair with my wife, he said plainly. The words wiped the smile from her face. Her hand trembled as she lowered her coffee mug. He slid the evidence across the table, screenshots of messages, a photo from that night, even a recording of Emily saying Nathan's name.
Olivia absorbed everything in silence, her skin turning pale, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. When she finally spoke, her voice quivered, but carried strength. Thank you for telling me. Daniel gave a quiet nod and stood, leaving her with the truth that was now hers to carry. The weight of that conversation clung to him like bruises, deep and unseen. Whatever came next between Olivia and Nathan wasn't Daniel's burden. As he walked away, his thoughts tangled in a storm of emotion, anger, sorrow, a strange sense of relief, and a shadow of guilt. But his focus began to shift inward, toward the hard, necessary work of untangling himself from a marriage that no longer felt like home.